Hello and welcome to another episode of I'm reading a book I wrote when I was 14. And that book is titled Trash Desert. We are picking up in chapter 5. If you would like to catch the first 4 chapters, you can do that by clicking that little box up there. Now for those of you who know the backstory to this, go ahead and skip to the next chapter where I just start reading. For those of you who don't know, I wrote a book when I was 14 and I found it while we were cleaning out my childhood home. I have no recollection of this book, but it's 153 pages long. And whenever I say I have no recollection of the book, I mean major plot points, character names, all that good stuff. I remember that I wrote a book, and I remember that it's a fantasy sci-fi novel, kind of like Mad Max, kind of like Waterworld, kind of like, I don't know, it's a fantasy. But the big deal is that I'm reading it to you guys blindly. I have no idea. I've not read ahead or anything. So I get to experience this as you do. Let's begin. Hi, this is me, but from the future. I just wanted to say that I'm going to stumble a lot in the very first few pages of this chapter because it's so covered in red ink from the girl, Kate, who edited it, that it's a miracle I was even able to read it at all. So bear with me for like a few pages. It gets better, I promise. I can read. I am not illiterate. Chapter 5. I walked on. I still had the guitar and I played it every night. I loved playing the old songs from the band like Come Back, Floodwaters, Over My Head, and sometimes I would play songs from other bands that I liked. I loved almost any kind of guitar music. I would even play classical music. I would walk through the day marking my trail with metal I found so I wouldn't lose my way. I walked for a couple days after I had found the guitar. After a couple of days, I could smell an awful stench. I didn't know where it was coming from or what it was. All I know is that whatever it was rank. I was trying to fall asleep one night, but the stench was so bad I couldn't. I got down from the pile I was trying to fall asleep on just as the sun was rising. I put on my backpack, maybe? And went off trying not to get sick from the horrible smell. After a few hours, the smell was almost unbearable. It was as if whatever it was that was stinking so bad was right in front of me. I walked just around a junk pile. As I was coming around the pile, I was hit with the powerful scent of decaying meat. I instantly got sick and got rid of whatever was in my stomach very quickly. I looked at what the smell was coming from. I was horrified. All around the junk pile were dead bodies, scattered everywhere. I was also surprised they were human bodies. They were not from civilization, though. Most of them were wearing rags as clothes. Some were naked. What could have done this, I asked myself. The bodies were cut, chewed up. It's horrible. The sand was stained with old blood. The massacre was recent, but was not done today. I would say that it was only 2 days old. I also noticed something. Out of the ground, not far away, was a piece of long metal sticking out of the ground. I looked off into the distance and there was another one. This would not have bothered me so much, but to my left there was a junk pile that looked as if it had been tampered with. I walked up to the pile. I looked at the pile for a while. I saw bed frames, a couch, and the back end of a car sticking out of the rubbish. Oh no. I was thinking really hard. All of a sudden, I tripped over something and cut my hand on a little piece of metal. Stood to my feet and then looked at what I tripped over. I was horrified now. I was looking at a pile of bones and shards of metal. I was looking at the carcass of a junk dog that somebody had cleaned and eaten. That somebody was me. I had walked all these months thinking I might be getting somewhere, but I had gone in a huge circle. I fell on my knees. I was never going to get out of this dusty, trashy, dangerous pit of despair. I decided to give up right there on the spot and lay there with the rest of the dead bodies. Wait a minute, I thought out loud. Dead bodies? That's right. What killed all these people? I just forgot that I was standing in a fresh cemetery. My question was soon answered. I felt searing pain go through my shoulder, the wet nose of a junk dog on my cheek. I yelled as I was quickly taken up into the air. I slammed to the ground not even 3 seconds later. I turned over, coughing out all the dust I had inhaled when I met the ground. When I opened my eyes, I saw another pair in front of my face. I was jittery, not really thinking straight. I wasn't really concentrating on anything. I was coming back to my senses. I remembered that I was in trouble. The animal in front of me. No, the beast in front of me. It looked so familiar. Drool was falling from its mouth onto my bloody t-shirt. I had seen that same face before, but where? I could see that it was a junk dog, but I didn't know what stood out about it so much. Was it the color? No. Most junk dogs were black and brown. Was it the size? It might have been. Was it the metal edge running down its neck? Yes, that was it. I had seen this canine before. I wasn't exactly thinking straight. I couldn't feel much either. I was seeing double now, too. I shut my eyes, waiting for something. Wait, what had happened? I tried to open my eyes. I saw water. I was looking around. I was on a boat. I looked at the bow. There was Stephanie, her dark curls blowing in the wind. I walked to her. I got right to her. She put her arms out to embrace me. Then I fell. I fell through her into the beautiful blue water. Only in the water, it was black, pitch black. Then I realized I was dreaming. I didn't want the dream to end. The dark water felt cool, good on my body. I stopped struggling. I let myself slowly float to the bottom of this dream water and listened to the aquatic sounds, which eventually turned to silence. Boy, a lot of stuff has happened in a very short amount of time. I woke up. It was dark where I was. What had happened? I keep asking that question. Was I dead? Had I been torn apart by that beast? I didn't feel dead. I was lying in a cot. I got to my feet. I was in a tent. I looked around at my surroundings. There was a table with strange instruments on it. There were beds hanging down from the ceiling and other things. I saw the entrance. I walked to it. I looked out. There were other tents like the one I was in. They were all surrounding one huge junk pile. I couldn't believe the size of this pile. I had been out here for over a year. This was bigger than the largest house I had ever seen. It looked as if it were about as tall as a 15-story building and at least as big around as a large hospital. I stepped outside. That one question kept coming back to my head. Why hadn't the beast killed me? Was that a rhetorical question? I hadn't noticed it, but there was a man standing beside me. He was wearing black clothes. He had silver hair and a silver beard. I could tell he was old by the wrinkles on his face and the color of his hair. Goodness. But he didn't sound like it. If he had been on a phone, I would think he was only about 20. He was about as tall as I was, 5'11", but he was built like a spider, had long limbs, and he was very skinny. "Excuse me?" I asked. "You asked why that monster hadn't killed you," he responded. "Oh yes. Sorry, it's kind of hard for me to concentrate. I have a horrible headache." "Yes, you took quite a blow to the head. You were knocked out, and if my people had not shown up, you would have been killed," he told me. "Really? What happened?" I asked. "You were attacked by a beast out in the desert about 3 days' walk from here, and my men had taken slaves out to collect more tools for the camp. We were attacked by 3 of the beasts. They killed all the slaves. My men of honor were able to protect themselves. Sadly, we lost 2 of them. We were able to chase off 2 of the dogs. The other one left when he felt like it. Our spears and swords didn't scare it at all. We walked for a ways and made camp for about 3 days. On our way back, we passed by the place where the battle had been. That's when we saw you being tossed around like a rag doll by the canine. We were able to distract it long enough to save your life. This time, the men were able to put out one of the monster's eyes." My memory was coming back to me now. I remember my bloody t-shirt and hitting the ground. "You're beat up pretty bad. The nurse didn't think you would make it through the first night. How long ago was I attacked?" "About 5 days ago. You've been asleep almost the whole time." My memory was coming back almost all the way now. "Why do you think the beasts were there?" "They smell they're dead. They have a very keen sense of smell. If one of their kin have been killed, they will stay at the spot where they lost their life for up to a year, and will go back to that spot often, almost every other week for about 5 years. It's like they know that the murderer will return to the scene of the crime, and they're waiting to get revenge." The man kept talking about how the junk dogs were always watching, and how they knew everything there was to know about their surroundings. It got to where I couldn't pay attention. I didn't believe most of it. I did believe they were smart and had keen senses. There wasn't a doubt in my mind about that. "You should get some rest." "Excuse me?" I completely drifted off in my own world. "I said that you should get some rest. We're expecting you to have dinner with us." "Us meaning who?" I asked. The man laughed deeply. "You did take a good one to the head. You could drift off into dreamland if I was waving gold in front of your face. Me and my men, of course, and the Empire." I thought of what I must look like. "Oh, sir, I thank you for your generosity, but I couldn't. I must look terrible." "Nonsense. There's a shower behind your tent. One of my men will be here to show you the way during third quarter sun." Third quarter sun? What was he talking about? This was going to be an interesting stay here in this little colony. Chapter 6. I figured that third quarter day meant sometime during the afternoon. I looked at the sun and guessed I had about 3 hours before the sunset. I was sitting on my cot thinking about what all must have happened in the past 5 days. I had a huge bandage on my left shoulder, and my head and pecs were very sore. I saw clothes set out and looked at them. There was a paper note on top. It read, "Stranger, change into these clothes after you clean up." I picked up the clothes. They were all black. The shirt was made of light fabric, and the pants were made of leather, comfortable fit. There was a leather jacket also. I didn't think I would wear it. It was at least 75 degrees outside. It would be insane to wear a jacket like that. I walked behind my tent. I don't know how it was possible. I didn't think it was true. There was no way, but right before me there was a shower. I stepped inside and twisted the only knob. Cold water hit my body, just like in the dream I had only a few nights ago. It made me jump when the water hit my left shoulder. I didn't want to take the bandage off. I didn't want to see a bad wound on my body. It would probably depress me. Well, I saw that there was soap in front of me. How did these people get this stuff? After the shower, I felt much better, much cleaner. I walked into the tent I was staying in and over to a tub in the corner. There was a looking glass standing next to it. I still looked like crap. My dark brown hair was past my shoulders now. I had a horrible looking beard growing. It was about 3 inches long and looked skanky. I looked at the table. There were different items on it. A comb, a knife, rusty scissors, and lotion. I figured I could use this stuff to trim up. I took up the lotion and squirted some into my hand, rubbed it on my rough face, then took up the knife and began shaving. Before the sun set, somebody was at the flap of the tent. "Stranger, I've come to take you to dinner." I poked my head out. "Sorry, sir, I'm straight." The bottom half of the man's face was covered. He stared hard at me, showing no sign of amusement. "Just a little humor, big guy. I'll be out in just a second." I pulled my head inside. I walked over to the looking glass and looked, which is what you do in a looking glass. I really didn't look half bad. My hair was about 2 inches long now, and I was clean shaven. I had made sure to get the sideburns too. I looked good in the clothes also. My tall, stocky body fit well in them. I was ready to go. 5 minutes later, I was standing in front of the Empire. I still could not believe that it was this big. There was no way to describe how great this tower of trash stood. I don't know why someone would make a pile of junk that high. Then as soon as this thought entered my head, it was out again. The man that had led me to this junk pile yelled, "Open the doors!" Soon after, a huge drawbridge, which just so happened to be the shell of a '93 Oldsmobile, was lowered. This was too bizarre. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Inside, people in old rags were lowering the car with the ropes. Then, as soon as the car hit the ground and came to a stop, an old man so small and scrawny came out with a plank of wood, setting it down like a ramp over the car. Then an old woman about the same size did the same thing as the old man, making a bridge over the car. So the man and I could get into this pile of trash. I entered with this man, and inside it was like a factory or a palace with all of these people in rags running all over the place, cleaning and working things. I couldn't believe my eyes. The man and I walked further. The further we walked, the nicer things got. There was a staircase with silver railings, and did my eyes deceive me? There was a crystal chandelier hanging from high above, and paintings everywhere, religious paintings, paintings of pastures, the paintings of the forest and animals, not beasts, but animals like deer, squirrels, bears, and elk. There were so many paintings. I stopped walking. I couldn't help but stare at all the things in this room. "This is what we call the painting hall," the man said. "You can look later. We don't want to be late for dinner." The man started going up the stairs, and I followed behind him. I was amazed at everything I saw. We walked up 4 flights of stairs, every floor nicer than the one before. The man turned to me. "This is the door to the dining hall. Show respect for the Lord Belshard. Eat everything on your plate and only answer questions. Don't ask any." Okay? What was I getting myself into? Did I really want to go into that room and eat a fine meal with a king, or whatever he was supposed to be, that I didn't even know? I walked to the door, a little nervous of what could be on the other side. I pushed the heavy wooden door open. There was a long table with all kinds of different delicacies set out on it. There were fruits like apples, oranges, cherries, and bananas. There were all kinds of vegetables. There were green beans, corn on the cob, many, many more on different platters. But in the middle of the table, there was a huge bird. It was like a 50-pound turkey. None of this could be true. I must have still been dreaming back on the ground, bleeding in the sand. The first man I had seen outside my tent, the great Lord Belshard, stood at the table and smiled at me. "Welcome to my table. Come and eat with me, my most honored Man, what? Hold on. I don't understand where we are. Okay. The first man I had seen outside my tent, the great Lord Belshard, stood at the table and smiled at me. Welcome to my table. Come and eat with me and my most honored men. I was eating at the right hand of the King Belshard. The meat was so tender. The fruit and vegetables were the best I had ever had. They were so juicy and sweet. We ate in silence for the most part, except for the occasional good comment about the food from the king, and I agreed. Finally, the king and I were full, and more people in rags came in and cleaned off the table. Lord Belshard spoke. You are all dismissed, he said. I started to get up. Except for you, mystery man. I wish to talk with you. I sat back down. After all of the other people exited the room, Lord Belshard sat down across from me. He looked at me hard, then he smiled. I like you, he said. There's something about you that says, I'm a fighter and I will survive. I don't know what it is, but you seem like an honorable man. He got this from just eating food with this guy. We still don't know the main character's name. I don't know what it is, but you seem like an honorable man. Honorable man. If only he knew. Thank you, sir. I feel much better about myself now. The king laughed loudly and deeply. That's another good thing about you. You have a good sense of humor. Not many people around here have that. I didn't know I was funny. I just like to answer things smartly. Thank you again, sir. What's your name, boy? The king asked. Jake, sir. We finally know the main character's name. It's Jake. I feel so let down. I was thinking it was going to be something crazy cool like Maxon or something. It's Jake. Jake, that's a good, strong name. Not as strong as Maxon. The king was looking at me hard now. Do you know how much you weigh? Lord Belshard, please. No, sir, I haven't been able to weigh myself in over a year. Why is that, my boy? The king asked. I've been lost out here in the desert for over a year. Lost? How can someone manage to lose themselves out here in this deserted wasteland? Should I tell him why? Should I tell him of all I have done? No, he thinks I'm an honorable man. Did I just break the fourth wall? I guess I broke the fourth wall in the first sentence of the book anyway, so. Should I tell him of all I've done? No, he thinks I'm an honorable man already. I don't want him to change his mind this soon, not while I'm trying to get to know him. That's right, the best friendships are always built on deceit. Well, my friends and I came out into these lands to camp. I went to go to the bathroom and I couldn't find my way back. I decided right there that that was the worst lie I had ever told in my life. The king nodded in respect. I'm sorry to hear that, my boy. I know what it feels like to be lost, but I made the best of it, as you can see. So he knows exactly how it is to get lost in the desert. Why did he even ask? I nodded in agreement. He had done a lot with all of this old junk. I wondered what he meant by he knew what it was like to be lost. Had he been like me when he was younger? Could he have been in the same situation? So, lad, if you don't mind me asking, where are you from? Should I tell him? He did seem to know his way around this land. Maybe he could get me out of this pit of despair, and I could get on my way back home to friends and family and a fiancé, and perhaps a gruesome death by beheading in front of the courthouse. That would be a real waste. Still, I live in the Johnston Lake Village, sir, a suburb to the extremely large city, Hayden. Never heard of those colonies, he replied. Never heard of them? What? How could you not have heard of Johnston's Lake Village or Hayden? Those cities were well known around these parts. How would you know? You don't even know where you are. You're lost. I'm not from around here. I actually came from across the seas. We crashed on some beach a week's walk from here. My friends and I walked and walked and walked and walked. We finally figured out that we had walked in circles for 2 years. Lord Belshard yawned and stretched his long spidery arms into the air, popping his back. So finally we started to build. We started from scratch, literally. One day we found that there were other people here among the junk piles. We found them and asked if they would help. They said yes, and to this day they are happy working around my empire, working on things, cleaning up. They're always happy as long as I keep my end of the bargain. And what was that, I asked. Why, to feed them. As long as I fed them well, they would stay and help. I was always fascinated by all of this. A man who was just as lost as I was at the moment could start from scratch. What? Where am I? What? I see where I am. To feed them. As long as I fed them well, they would stay and help. I was fascinated by all this. A man who was just as lost as I was at the moment could start from scratch and make everything work out for himself and his friends. That is fascinating, sir. It really is. I am truly amazed. I couldn't have done it without help, my friend. I couldn't have done it by myself. There was a long pause filled with silence. Lord Belchard looked at me hard. He looked into my eyes. I'm pretty sure he eyeballed every muscle in my body. Oh boy, is this about to turn into a Harlequin romance. Finally, he spoke. Jake, would you like to live here? I didn't know what to say. I was speechless. Of course I would like to live there. Who wouldn't? But wait, I couldn't. I had made a promise that I would try my absolute hardest to get back home. My absolute hardest. I would go until I died. I don't know. I already have a home. That's what I've been trying to get back to this whole time I've been here. I'd make it worth it to you. I would let you share my riches. Everything you see here could be yours as well as mine. I thought for a few seconds, which was all I needed. I don't think so, sir. I've got family back home. You can't give that to me here. I really am truly sorry. You would be willing to risk death out there to try to get back to some place you don't even know if you can ever find again. Why? Because I've made an oath that with God as my witness, I would try until death to reach home again. Then you're just as honorable as I thought you were, the king said. A man is not a man if he cannot keep his word, but surely you can stay a week, at least until your wounds are completely healed. I didn't see what harm it could do. Sure, I can do that. I thank you for letting me stay. It's an honor to have you as a guest, Jake. Lord Belchard took my hand and shook it. I already have your room ready. I had a feeling that this was going to be a very pleasant stay. Chapter 7. My room was magnificent. I had only seen rooms like this inside of fancy buildings in the big cities. The floor was shiny blue marble. I don't know how he could have done it. There was more paintings of forests on my wall, and even 2 animal statues. One was a tall cat made of brass. It came a little bit to above my knees. The other was a black marble swan that had its wings spread as if it were landing in a pool of water. They were magnificent. My bed felt heavenly. I laid down on it and instantly sank deep into the cushion. I looked up at the ceiling to see that it was high above me. It was black with the Milky Way galaxy painted on it. It was equally beautiful as anything else in the room, yet nothing could compare to the real stars. There was nothing more beautiful than laying down under the stars, one of God's year-round gifts, like the sunsets. I drifted off the first night and had a dream. It was a good dream. I dreamt that I was about 30. My wife Stephanie and I were living in this empire, only there was nobody else, just me and her, and every night we would go out on top of this palace and lay under the stars, and we were the happiest we could ever be. I wish that I had more dreams like it. They helped me remember everything, but also, while having the dreams, I never wanted to wake up. Why couldn't dreams like those last forever? When I awoke after having such good dreams, I would pray. Pray that I could return home and see all my friends and family before I was too old and forgotten about. For that was my biggest fear. The next morning I awoke. I didn't know exactly where I was at first, and then my memory of the day before came back. It was dark in the room. I couldn't see much. I waited a minute for my eyes to adjust, and when they had done so, I looked around. There was a window, but thick shades had been pulled down over it. I walked to it. I observed the shades and noticed a pulley to the side. I grabbed a hold of the rope hanging from the hole in the wall. I pulled hard. The pulley did nothing to the window, but about 2 feet away, a trapdoor in the wall close to the floor was lifted up. Well, that was a significant find, but how did you open the window? I looked all around, and finally I saw it. There was a lever about halfway up the window frame. I pulled this, and the heavy shades quickly rolled up. I was hit with the bright morning sunlight pouring in through the square hole in the wall. I stood there a moment looking out over the vast wasteland that covered about half the eastern hemisphere. The sunrise looked beautiful out there, all orange with a big red ball in the middle of it, slowly getting higher and higher in the air. It especially looked good from this height. I would say that it was about 150 feet in the air. It was spectacular. As I stood there looking and enjoying all of this, a huge eardrum exploding, massive, horrible sound erupted all over the palace. It was as if a deep belt had just exploded from the bowels of the empire. It did this 3 times. Not even 5 minutes later, there was a knock at the door of the room. Outside of my door was a girl, a young, skinny, but not too skinny girl, about my height and looked roughly my age, standing up straight and tall at my door as if she had perfect posture. She had light skin, as if she had not been exposed to the sunlight as much as everybody else had. Her lips were light pink, and she had green eyes that matched perfectly with her straight, nearly shoulder-length red hair. "Good morning, sir. I came to see if you were awake," she said in a light, almost whisper of a voice. "What were those sounds I just heard?" I asked. "Oh, sir, you weren't the only person to hear them. Everybody in the Empire hears those sounds every morning during first quarter day, just as the sun is rising. Those bellows are the rising horns." "Ah," I said. I was going to be waking up to the sound of screaming elephants with bronchitis for about a week. Lovely. "The Lord Belchard wishes that you would dine with him this morning, stranger." "Please, just call me Jake," I said. Being called stranger really gets old. "Yes, Master Jake, I apologize." Master Jake? Had she just called me Master Jake? She had. No, not Master Jake, just Jake, okay? "I cannot call you by that. I am to show respect for the stranger, for I am his servant and he is my master." This is absolutely insane. I didn't want to be Master Jake. I didn't want to be Sir. I didn't want to be Stranger. I just wanted to be Jake and nothing else. "Come now. Lord Belchard is waiting for your arrival." You'll have to excuse me, but I don't have anything to wear." I was sure that I shouldn't show up in my boxer shorts for breakfast with the king, but I didn't have anything to wear except for the clothes I'd worn yesterday. It wouldn't be a problem to wear those again, I'm sure, but I couldn't find them. I had laid them down in a pile by the side of the bed, but now they're gone. The girl got a puzzled look on her face. "What happened to the clothes you wore yesterday?" "That's just it. I don't know. I had them laid out, but this morning they were gone." She stared at me, still looking puzzled. "Well, clothes don't just get up and walk away in the middle of the night. You must have misplaced them." I was silent and embarrassed. I honestly couldn't tell her what I had done with my clothes. I must have looked pretty stupid at the moment, being without clothes in a palace like this. She started to giggle, then burst into laughter. It was at this moment that I became very confused. "I'm sorry," she said. "I had to do that. You did not misplace your clothes. I came in during the night and sent them to the wash." I didn't know what to say, so I just smiled and let out a small laugh, still a little confused. I must not have fully recovered from hitting my head when I was attacked. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't tease you so early in the morning, sir." "It's all right," I said. "I've been a little slow for the past few days, so what do I wear?" She answered, "You have more clothes in your chest." She pointed at a wooden dresser by the wall. "You also have a sink in your bathroom next door, and a flushable toilet. Also, last night I prepared a bathroom bag for you and gathered all your things from the tent you were staying in. I put them on the shelf behind you." I turned around to look. There was my old pack, guitar case, and a little bag right next to it. "You only have about 6... What the am I going to have to do math in this book? "You only have about 10/60,000s. What? Oh no, this is going to get ridiculous. I guess that the concept of time in this book is like different. I didn't want to use just like regular clocks. Oh boy. "You only have about 10/60,000s to get to the dining area. I suggest that you hurry. I will be waiting here to lead you to the king." I went back inside and opened my pack and looked in. Everything was still there. I saw 3 cans of food, my 2 knives, shot shells, and a can opener, just the way I had left it. I went to the dresser. I opened the top drawer and there were socks, all black. I took out a pair and put them on. I opened the drawer below. There were many, many shirts. They were all black. Some were long sleeved, some were short sleeved, and others had no sleeves. I decided to wear one with short sleeves. Then I looked at what was in the bottom drawer, and of course, there were black leather pants. Well, there were pants on one side and black briefs on the other. I decided against wearing the briefs. I took out a pair of pants and put them on. There was a looking glass on the wall like the one in my tent. I decided I looked decent enough and put my hands in my pockets of the pants I was wearing to find that they were actually pretty deep. Gotta have deep pockets on your leather pants, people. I wondered to myself, what is the deal with the color black around here? There was a loud knock on the door at that moment. "Master Jake, come on, there are only 6/60,000s until it's time to eat." I stretched and yawned. "I'm coming right now," I answered, walking toward the door. As I stood in front of the door, I turned around to look at the room. I really did like this room. I sure as heck wasn't living like this when I was living back home. I dismissed this thought quickly, remembering that I couldn't stay and that I had to try my hardest to get back home when I was feeling better. I opened the door, and the girl and I walked to the dining area. Chapter 8, and the final chapter of this episode. We had walked down 4 or 5 flights of stairs when we finally reached the floor. We walked a few minutes more and ended up standing in front of the same door I had entered last night to eat with the king and his men. "This is where you'll be eating, Master Jake. Remember to be respectful to Jerk Belshard and answer all of his stupid questions truthfully. Enjoy your meal." I must have heard wrong. She said most of this low to where I could barely hear some of the words that she had said. I had to have heard wrong, so I ignored it, opened the door, and walked inside. At first I thought I had missed breakfast. There was no one inside that I could see at first, and then I saw the king sitting at the end of the table. "Good morning, Jake," he said heartily. "Thank you for coming to dine with me." "I'm sorry if I'm late, sir." "Oh, no worries, son. No worries, my boy," he said. "Just don't let it happen again, or I'll have to hang you." I looked up at the king, and I could feel that I had gone pale when he said this. Then he laughed out loud. "Just a joke, my boy, just a little bit of humor. I love doing that. Sit down and get ready to eat, son." I smiled and sat across from the king. At that time, 3 people came through a couple of swinging doors. One man had a pot, one man had a dish of fruit, and one lady had a pitcher of white juice. They sat the food down in front of us. "Ah," Lord Belchard exclaimed, "this looks delicious. Let's eat." I took a couple pieces of fruit, and inside the pot was something the king called breakfast stew. I looked inside, and what I saw I would classify as mud, but the king seemed to like it. So I dipped the ladle in, took out a bit, put it in the bowl that I was given, and took a sip. I decided at that precise moment that the sludge hit my tongue that it was my new favorite food. It was brown and did look exactly like mud, but it was sweet. I learned that the white juice was not juice, but milk. I loved its thickness and taste. I hadn't had milk in over a year. How have you seen milk before and you just assume it's white juice? Then a question popped into my head. Where do they get all this? How could they have gotten milk out here in this wasteland? How could they have half of the things that they did out here in the middle of nowhere? My questions were about to be answered. After Lord Belchard and I finished eating, we had a little question-answer session. I learned a lot about the place I'd been staying and the man who ruled it and had since he had been 25. "So, my boy, I've learned enough about you for the time being. What do you want to know about me? What do you want to know about anything you see around you?" "Well," I replied, "I guess I could start by asking about the food." "Shoot for it. What do you want to know?" "Well, where you got it, for starters." The king looked at me and smiled. "That's a very good question, Jake. Well, let's see. Do you remember how I told you I was from across the seas? Well, I left from the Red Lands when I was 21 years of age. I took many of my friends and their wives or girlfriends with me, and we set out on a voyage to find some place to have a nice, relaxing vacation away from home, not knowing that almost half of the Eastern Hemisphere was wasteland, mostly because we were ignorant and never watched the news or paid attention to what was going on around us. I had a very large boat about the size of a cruise ship, for I came from a wealthy family, so we were comfortable during the voyage. You know, people become restless and have to get away from things for a while, and that's why we had come out here in the first place. We started to get tired of being on a boat, so we decided the next bit of land we saw that we were going to stop there. Not even a day after we had made that decision, we saw land. It was green and lush and had beautiful vegetation. We decided to land there. As we were approaching this holy land, we hit something. Or actually, something had hit us. Whatever it was large enough to stop my boat. We were rammed again in the same spot. This was an extremely large creature, whatever it was, and it had put a nice-sized hole in my boat. We started sinking fast. All of my friends were panicking as I could only stand back and watch in a state of shock as we sank. Finally, the boat capsized. I sank far down into the water. I didn't think I was going to live and almost wanted to give up, but then I found the strength to swim back to the surface. I don't know where that strength came from. The king just sat there now, reminiscing of that day, I suppose, thinking of the horror and the pain. He spoke again, still deep in thought. "We swam to shore, and there were over 500 people on that boat when we had left home. Only a little over 400 came out of the water. None of us had anything but the clothes on our back and what was in our pockets. I also lost my best friend that day, Jonathan O'Balfeld. He was 22 and had a fiancée waiting for him back home." I'm so sorry to hear that, sir," I said respectfully. "There's no reason to be sorry, lad. It was hard to get along with then, but I've been well over it for 26 years now. Anyway, we camped on the beach for a night. The next morning, another man that I knew had to use the bathroom. He went out into the woods, and only minutes later we heard him screaming. Everybody that was on that beach ran out into the woods to see what had happened. When we reached the spot that we thought we had heard him from, we heard him yelling further off in the distance, and soon after his cries of pain stopped. Everybody was frightened at the time. We all just sat down on the ground and complained of how we should have never come out on this trip, how we were hungry and scared. Finally, after a whole day of whimpering, I took out my compass and everybody voted that we would travel north and that we would start out the next morning. Everybody started gathering fruit from trees and eating till they were full. That made them stop complaining a little. Then we went to sleep as the sun went down, only to be awakened at night by the screaming of many of the women and some of the men. I sat straight up and looked to see what was going on. I let my eyes adjust to the darkness. Most of the light from the moon was blocked out, so it took a couple of minutes. All I knew was that there were people running in all kinds of different directions. I tried to get their attention but couldn't. My eyes had fully adjusted and I really couldn't see what was going on. All I saw were small trees blowing wildly in the wind. But I was wrong. They weren't being blown in the wind. They were moving their limbs about wildly. I looked on the ground and saw that there were dead bodies all around me and dark pools of blood all around the bodies. One of these walking trees came towards me. I took out my compass and began running north. I yelled for the others who could hear me to follow. We ran until dawn. I took a head count as soon as everybody who was left was gathered up. There were only, if I remember right, 347 left. We walked during the day. We always kept going north, and during the night we ran. We never stopped to rest. We always kept walking. We tried to carry the ones who fell down of exhaustion, but found out later that we couldn't carry all of them. Finally, it got to the point that we had to leave those who were weak behind. Finally, we reached the edge of the forest. We had been there for 3 days when we had gotten out. There were only roughly 250 people left, including myself, so now we wandered the wasteland only for 2 days, though, and we kept going north. Many more people fell down dead while we walked. When it looked like all was lost, we started looking through all those trash piles you see out there. I came up with the idea of all of this. Then I and the people were with me befriended a couple of the nomadic tribes out here. They taught us how to hunt the weak beasts in the forest, and finally, over about the period of a year, my people became much better than they were, and we made a pact to each other that if I would feed them, they would work and help build my empire, and they did a pretty good job at it, as you can see. Yes, I could definitely see that they had done a good job. They did a marvelous job. Anyway, we were taught how to garden and hunt from those nomads, and that is where we got all the food from. Every other week, I go on hunting trips with my most honored men. What about the milk? Where'd you get that from? I asked. When we go hunting, we bring back baby animals, and a lot of the time we're able to tame and breed them. We even have tame wing horses. Pegasus? This was all unbelievable, but at the time, I guess, practical. What about the plumbing? Lord Belchard laughed loudly. That, my boy, is an interesting story, he told me. One day, one of my men was digging a hole. I can't remember what exactly it was for, but he broke through the ground and the water came gushing out. We were able to plug up the little hole, and about a year later, we were running water to every room in this place. What about all of your men? Where did they come from? All of my men are the sons and daughters of the people who survived the boat wreck in the woods. What about the servants? Servants? The king laughed louder than ever. Those people you see are no servants. They are the sons and daughters of the nomads I told you about. They work for a place to sleep and food, but they don't have to work for me. The king looked out the window behind him. Jake, I hate to rush you out like this, but I must go see to the fighters. They've been practicing for this next hunt. I have to go see which ones can go and which ones can't. Feel free to roam about the castle. You can go anywhere in the castle that you like, except for the rooms on the 8th and 9th floor, in the pit of the Empire. I'm sorry, sir, I don't understand some of your dialect. What is the pit of the Empire? It's the lowest level of the palace. I wouldn't care if you went down there, but the workers don't appreciate it. Ah, I replied. I had one other question. Lord Belchard, we were walking towards the door now. Yes, he replied. Who was the girl that came to check on me this morning? She's one of the workers, Keisha. She will be tending to you while you stay here. She's a very nice girl, very willing to work. I think that she will take very good care of you. Now, we shall part. Oh, make sure to be in your room when it's at the end of the second quarter day, when the sun is right overhead. You will eat lunch in your room. Also, will you be able to join me and my men again for supper tonight? Sure, I said. I love dining with you. Thank you, lad, and I love dining Period. The king laughed loudly again. Well, I will see you tonight. At that time we parted, and I was left to do what I wanted until noon. All right, so there we go, guys. We have learned the main character's name. It's just funny to me. You got all these other names. You got like Lord Belshard, and then the servant girl, your Keisha, and then our main character's name is just Jake. Cool, all right. I accept. Let's go through and read some of the editor's notes here. For the 1060 thousandths. 1060 thousandths. I hope I didn't write that out a whole lot in this book because I'm going to have a hard time with that. She says, is this a measurement of time? What does it equal? I don't know. I'm assuming 1060 thousandths. I'm assuming that's 10 minutes. Why the I wouldn't just write 10 minutes? I don't know. I was a complicated teen. What can I say? She says, you open stuff too much. Pull it open, push it open, shove it open. Use something else with open to make it more interesting. Good description of the girl, though. You spent more time on her than your own main character. You're right. Oh, we did. He had brown hair and a beard going on. He said it was skanky, and he shaved. So he's clean shaven with brown hair. Okay. You know who I'm picturing? Like, I'm getting some Dune vibes off of this, which is funny because I don't think I read or watched Dune until I was like close to 20. I can't remember the main character of Dune's name, but the guy that plays in Twin Peaks, that guy. I'm getting some vibes like that for the main character. And I think that, yeah, there's some very Dune vibes going on. Well, guys, that's going to do it for today's video. I hope that you enjoyed it. And if you did, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't. Also, be sure to check out the video I posted earlier this week where I painted over the top of a thrift store print. You guys have a wonderful week. And next week, we pick up in chapter 9.